For 1,000 years, she was more than a city. She was an idea, the queen of cities, the eye of the world, the golden apple of empires, desired by all, but held by none. This was Constantinople. She was the last surviving light of the Roman Empire, a fortress of faith and commerce standing defiant at the crossroads of the world. Her foundations were sunk deep into legend. Her defenses were not just walls, they were a statement. 1,000 years of storms, sieges, nomadic hordes, and rival empires had broken against them and failed. The great Theodosian land walls, a triple-layered fortress of stone, 6 kilometers long, studded with towers. A masterpiece of engineering, believed by many to be unconquerable, perhaps even protected by God himself. And inside, a vibrant, living city of 500,000 souls. A center of art, philosophy, and trade. A final beacon of Roman civilization, tragically unaware that its 1,000-year story was approaching its final, violent page. Music shifts. A low, ominous drone fades in. Because beyond those ancient, sleeping walls, a new power was gathering. A new kind of man, with a new kind of ambition. A storm was forming in the east. On a distant hill, a lone Ottoman scout watched the city, a dark silhouette against the dawn. The wolves were gathering. From his palace window in the Blacherny, the last Roman emperor, Constantine XI, could feel the shadow gathering. He was a shepherd, guarding the flock at the end of the world. He was the heir to a legacy of Caesars and eagles, a legacy of 1,500 years of unbroken Roman rule. He carried the weight of that history on his shoulders, and he would be its last. As night fell, the fields beyond the walls disappeared, replaced by a sea of campfires. An ocean of fire stretching to the horizon. A 21-year-old Sultan, Mehmed II, had arrived, driven by prophecy and a burr. Mehmed knew this would not be a war of swords and spears. The old ways were dead. This would be a new war, a war of gunpowder and industry. He had sought out a Hungarian engineer, a Christian named Urban. Urban had first offered his services to Constantinople, but the bankrupt city could not afford him. So he went to Mehmed. The Sultan asked him one question: "Can you build a cannon to break the walls of Babylon?" Urban said yes. The result was a monster, a demon of bronze, the Great Bombard, a super cannon, 27 feet long, so massive it took 60 oxen and thousands of men just to drag it into position. It fired stone balls weighing over 1,200 pounds, each one a flying piece of a mountain. The defenders on the wall waited. For 6 weeks, they had held the line. They put their faith in their stone, in the walls that had never failed. The first shot did not just shatter stone. It shattered 1,000 years of belief. It tore a hole in the impregnable outer wall, the size of a house. The sound was the crack of doom, heard for miles. Mehmed's cold satisfaction was mirrored by the terror on the walls. The defenders had never seen, never imagined, such power. The psychological shock was as devastating as the physical one. The city panicked, but from the chaos, one man emerged. Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, a Genoese soldier of fortune, a rival of the city, but a master of defense. He had arrived with 700 elite soldiers, a professional warrior ready to guard the walls. He was the city's new shield. He represented the 7,000 against the 100,000. As the cannon tore a hole in the wall, Giustiniani and the people of the city, civilians, monks, women, ran towards it. A new, desperate cycle began. This was not a battle. It was a grueling, daily execution. By day, the cannons destroyed. The great Bombard fired, and the walls bled stone. By night, the land was lost. The walls were failing. The city's only hope was the sea. Here, they had one advantage: the Great Chain, a massive, ancient iron barrier that stretched across the mouth of their harbor, the Golden Horn. Behind it, the tiny, rotting Byzantine fleet was safe. Outside it, the entire Ottoman navy, Over 140 ships commanded by Admiral Balteoglu waited, frustrated and useless. But the city was starving. The grain silos were empty. All eyes turned to the horizon, praying for help, for a sign. Then, on April 20th, a speck for ships. 3 from Genoa, 1 from the emperor himself, running the Ottoman blockade, laden with grain and weapons. On the city walls, a roar of desperate, disbelieving joy. Men who had not eaten in days wept. They fell to their knees. Salvation had arrived. The Sultan was humiliated. His prize was being fed before his very eyes. He gave the order. The entire Ottoman fleet, over 140 oar-powered galleys, began to move. It was a swarm, a sea of wolves, descending on just 4. But the 4 Christian ships were carracks, massive, sail-powered. They were the high-castled, wooden mountains of the sea, towering over the low, fast Ottoman galleys. The Ottoman fleet swarmed them, but they could not board. They were too tall. From their high castles, the 700 defenders on the 4 ships rained down fire, arrows, and stone down on the fleet below. From the shore, Mehmed watched in impotent rage. He was said to have spurred his own horse into the sea, roaring at his defeated admiral. Battered, burning, but victorious, the 4 ships reached the chain. The great winch turned, the chain was lowered, and the 4 heroes sailed into the safe harbor. As the chain was raised behind them, a handful of men had defeated an entire navy. It was a miracle, but it would be their last. The Sultan's humiliation, his public naval defeat, cooled into a new, cold, terrifying resolve. He looked at his map. The great chain blocked the sea, but it did not block the land. His new plan was unthinkable. It was madness. It was genius. The hill of Galata, controlled by the neutral Genoese, stood beside the harbor. If he could not sail around the chain, he would sail over the hill. The order was given. By night, a forest was cleared. A road was built, not of stone, but of thousands of wooden logs, which were then covered in animal fat. A greasy, slippery track stretching for miles from the Bosphorus over the crest of the hill. Then came the true work. His fleet was dragged out of the water. 70 of his smaller galleys were placed in massive wooden cradles, with the power of thousands of men and hundreds of oxen, pulling with all their might. The impossible happened. A Byzantine sentry, guarding the safe harbor wall, looked across the water. He rubbed his eyes. He thought he was in a nightmare. He was not. A fleet of 70 Ottoman warships, with their sails unfurled, lit by torches, was gliding through the forest, cresting the hill, and sliding down into the Golden Horn. By dawn, the defenders awoke to a new Ottoman fleet inside their harbor. The city was now surrounded. The great chain was useless. The walls of the Golden Horn, the city's soft, single-layered underbelly, were now the new front line. The psychological blow was greater than any cannon. This Sultan was not a man. He was a force of nature. He broke the rules of reality. There was one last, desperate gamble. A secret counterattack. Venetian sailors, led by a man named Giacomo Cocco, prepared to fire ships, to sneak across the harbor and burn the new Ottoman fleet while it was anchored. They glee, fire, and desolation. The city gave in to despair. The emperor himself, his final, desperate gamble failed, walked from the walls, a broken man. The siege had lasted for weeks. The city was starving. The walls were rubble. Hope was a memory. There was nothing left but faith. And in the city square, the emperor, his crown and title meaningless, knelt in the dirt, praying with the last of his people. On May 28th, the final sunset washed the city in blood-red light. Ominous portents had filled the sky, an eclipse of the moon, a strange fog. The city felt cursed. That night, the city gathered for its own funeral. Inside the Hagia Sophia, the heart of their world, thousands gathered for one last service. And in that final darkness, a miracle happened. enemies for centuries, Greek Orthodox and Roman Catholic, who hated each other more than they feared the Sultan, forgot their hatred and prayed as one. Genoese, Venetian, and Greek knelt side by side, united in death. The last Roman emperor, Constantine, took his last communion and made his peace with God. He then walked out of the great church, leaving the light and walking into the darkness, not as an emperor, but as a soldier going to his post. Outside, there was no prayer, only preparation. Sultan Mehmed, his eyes fixed on the walls, waited. He had promised his men 3 days of unlimited plunder. Justiniani, the city's shield, his face caked in dust and exhaustion, made his final inspection. On the walls, a thin, silent line of 7,000 men waited in the pre-dawn mist. They looked out at a silent, black ocean of 100,000. The emperor, his face now calm, gave his final speech. He did not promise victory. He asked them to die for their God, for their families, for the memory of Rome. At 1:30 in the morning, the silence broke. The signal was given. The first wave was a human tide. The Bashi-bazooks, thousands of irregulars, driven by the promise of loot, sent forward to exhaust the defenders. On the walls, the defenders, led by Justiniani and Constantine, braced for impact. The alarm bells of the city began to clang in the darkness. The swarm hit the barricades. A chaotic, screaming mass of men, hacking at the wood, climbing over their own dead. But the 7,000 held. They fought with fire and stone and hot sand, while the Sultan's cannons provided a relentless, pounding barrage, smashing the makeshift walls. After 2 hours of brutal, grinding combat, the first wave broke and retreated in chaos. The defenders barely had time to breathe. The Sultan's professional troops, the Anatolian regiments, marched forward, silent, disciplined, and terrifying. The defenders' dread was real. This was the true assault. The second wave hit, and the true battle began. Their tactics were perfect, their ladders were protected by shield walls, and the battle became a brutal, grinding melee on the wall, a test of pure endurance. The emperor himself, his purple cloak torn, fought like a common soldier, roaring in the chaos, while Justiniani, the professional, held the line with cold, deadly efficiency. For hours, against impossible odds, the 7,000 held. They were winning. The second wave was wavering. Then, the moment, a cannonball or a splinter of stone smashed into the barricade. Justiniani, the man holding the entire defense together, was hit. He staggered, clutching his chest. His sword clattered to the ground. In agony, his nerve broke. He turned and left the wall to seek help. His soldiers, their hero, their iron shield, saw him leave.
Get the fire down there! Fall back! Move! What? He's leaving!
Giustiniani is gone! Run for your lives!
Giustiniani! The city is... Allahu Akbar! Forward to victory! The city is ours! Forward! The city is ours! Kill them all! Look at this silk! Nothing in here but dust! Grab everything you can carry, quickly! Faster! Move along now! Into the center!
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا